Hello, I'm Sherry Simmons.
And I'm Jan Simmons.
Thank you for joining our summit today on surviving and thriving during a world crisis. I'm super excited about our expert, Dr. Mark Goulston, who has quite a resume. Formerly a UCLA professor of psychiatry for over 25 years, former FBI and police hostage negotiation trainer, and author of several books, including PTSD for Dummies. You have a documentary on suicide prevention called Stay Alive. Thank you for being here today. I can't wait to talk to you.
Well, I can hardly wait to find out what we say.
You know, this whole summit is geared towards just the pressures and the tensions and the mounting everything, stress in our world right now, and how some of us are feeling really stuck. And how do we get ourselves unstuck? You've created an entire livelihood and business around giving voice to people's stories. Tell us how that started for you.
Well, a little bit of my background. So for the first 30 years as a practicing psychiatrist, I was specialized in suicide prevention. And maybe it was probably mostly luck, but none of my patients killed themselves. And it was interesting. I've been blessed because I had 7 mentors and they've all died. So that's not such a blessing. But one of my early mentors started the whole movement in the study of suicide. If you look up the name Dr. Edwin Schneidman, he's kind of the father of the study of suicide prevention. And so he was at UCLA and I was training there. And he was one of my first mentors. And he used to refer me these highly suicidal people, often who made multiple attempts and who other residents didn't want to see once they were discharged. And so Ed would call me up and it'd always be the same call. He'd say, "Mark, I'm with this lovely young woman. She's in a lot of pain, Mark. You could help her, see her." And then they'd be discharged and I'd see them. And here was my good fortune. After I finished training, I didn't work for an institution. For some reason or other, I went out into just practice. There was actually a fellowship I was going to do that fell through at the last minute. And I said, well, I'll just try being a practitioner. And what would happen is I would see these multiple attempters. And what I learned is that when I checked boxes and I looked into their eyes were telling me, you're checking boxes and I'm running out of time. Mm-hmm. And so I had this internal conflict, which was to check boxes. How's your sleep? Have you thought about it lately? Et cetera, et cetera. But I could see that the more that I was checking boxes, there was a barrier between that person and me. And so I had to make a decision. Do I want to help them or do I just want to cover myself so that I can put in the record that I asked all the right questions? Mm-hmm. And so I started to learn to listen into people's eyes. And what I'm trying to teach the world is anybody can listen into another person's eyes, but you have to get rid of anything in your mind. So you need to listen into people's eyes with a beginner's mind. I have a 16-month-old grandchild, and I just watch the way he looks at the world. He has a beginner's mind. So what happened is I started to listen into their eyes, and something I wrote about in my book, Just Listen, which changed everything. Is it okay that I'm sharing a story like this?
Absolutely.
So this is the power of telling stories, by the way, if you're listening in. Not only does it help me relive it, but telling stories captivates people's attention. So one of the turning points happened when I was seeing a patient that I'll call Nancy. And Nancy, before I started seeing her, had been in the hospital 2 to 3 months every year for about 40 years. And she'd made 3 or 4 suicide attempts. And I didn't think I was making any progress with Nancy. She would come in 2-3 times a week. And if you're me and I'm Nancy, she'd be like this. She wasn't catatonic, but she'd be like this. And I didn't think I was getting anywhere with her. And in those days, once a month, I would moonlight at a psychiatric hospital, a state psychiatric hospital, which meant that I would go there and I would cover for the other psychiatrists, and I would admit patients, and I'd go and settle down patients on some of the inpatient wards. And sometimes you don't sleep for 36 hours. So there was one weekend where I hadn't slept for 36 hours. And on Monday, there I was seeing Nancy. And because I hadn't slept, you know how your mind kind of does strange things.
Mhm.
So this is what happened. She's like this. And I'm looking at Nancy, and suddenly all the color in the room turned to black and white. So I'm looking out at a room and it's black and white. And I'm thinking, this is really weird. And then suddenly I felt these cold chills. And I thought, I'm having a stroke or a seizure. And she's just like this. So it wasn't rude. I'm a medical doctor, psychiatrist. So I did a neurologic exam on myself. So I'm going like this and like this. I'm tapping my elbows like this. I'm tapping my knees to see if I'm all there. And she's still like this. And so I realized I'm all there. I'm not having a stroke or a seizure. And then I had this crazy idea. I had this idea that I was looking out at the world through her eyes.
Mm.
And what she saw was black and white and cold. And then I leaned into it. And because I was sleep deprived, I blurted this out. Nancy, I didn't know it was so bad. And I can't help you kill yourself.
Mm.
But if you do, I will still think well of you. I'll miss you. And maybe I'll understand why you had to get out of the pain.
Mm.
And I thought to myself, I just gave her permission to kill herself. I just blew it. And that was the first time she looked at me. You know, she went from this to, she got like, huh? And then she looked at me and she looked right through me. And I looked into her eyes and she looked into mine, and I realized that I think I had gotten it right. And I thought she was going to say, thank you for understanding, I'm long overdue. And I got nervous. And I said, what are you thinking, Nancy? And she looked at me and she said, if you can really understand why I might have to kill myself to get out of the pain, maybe I won't need to.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, wow. And then she gave up the impulse. And then I looked at her like I'm looking at both of you, because I had her undivided attention. Maybe I'm having your undivided attention. And I said, here's what we're going to do. I'm not going to give you any advice or solutions because you've heard them all before, and you're not going to do some of them, and you're going to have to come back and tell me why you didn't do it. Would that be okay? And she looked at me with a look that said, I'm intrigued, keep talking. And I leaned in and I said, Nancy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find you wherever you are. And I'm going to keep you company there. And I'm going to do that as long as it takes, because I don't want you to be alone in hell anymore. Would that be okay? She
Wow.
started to cry. And so that's pretty much how I look at the world. And I'm trying to teach the world that we're all capable of doing that. But one of the reasons that stops us is when we start to see that anxiety in other people, it triggers our own anxiety. So we have this fear we're both going to drown, and then we start substituting. Well, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And again, I'm not against any of those treatments. I'm just sharing with you an approach that because I've been trying to figure out why didn't any of my patients kill themselves in over 20 years. And part of the way I look at the pain in the world, I'm a medical doctor. When you see the pain inside someone, so people are going through a lot of stress now, I look at that like an abscess filled with hopelessness in the dark night of the soul. an abscess filled with hopelessness in the dark night of the soul. And if you know anything about abscesses, you have to go in and drain it.
Yeah.
And then you leave it open. You put a drain in there and it heals from the inside out. And if you go in and suture the abscess too quickly, if you put lipstick on a pain, you'll get septic. It looks nice when you suture it, but you got to go in there and drain it. So part of what I'm teaching the world is how do you go in to the hopelessness abscess in the dark night of the soul, like I did with Nancy, and then when you keep that person company so they don't feel so alone, they heal from the inside out on your compassionate empathy with hope.
So,
I love that.
you look in, they say the eyes are the window to the soul, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in your work and your interviews and such, what does that tell you? What are you learning about the human spirit? It's fragile in my mind. It's fragile, but
Well, I will tell you this, but this is my the human spirit. If you look into someone's eyes, is always screaming at you to hear it. It's screaming.
yeah,
And if you look for it, you can see that it's screaming. And if it catches, and if it sees that you see that it's screaming, the screaming will start to turn to tears of relief. There's someone that I've become friends with, and I can't name drop, but he's very well known. And he's had a rough year. And a real rough year with probably 6 or 7 medical conditions. And he comes from New York. And I can do a little bit of hypnosis and visualization. And so about 6 months ago, I was doing sort of a visualization and relaxation with him. And I'll change his name and we'll call him Joe. And so imagine this guy, he's from a tough part of maybe Staten Island. And he's laying there on his bed and I'm doing sort of a house call. And I'd gotten to know him. And I said, I'd like you to close your eyes and lean into this. And so they're lying like this. And I said, this is what I hear you telling me. So this is what I learned from people like Nancy. I learned to be able to go in and put into words. And I said, I'm going to use a New York accent because you're a rough New Yorker. Think Governor Cuomo like this. And I said, this is what I hear you saying to me. Doc, I need to cry. I don't know how to cry. I've seen other people who have a good cry. I can cry for a nanosecond at a movie and then it goes away. But boy, I need a cry and I don't know how to cry. I've never known how to cry, but I am exhausted. I am exhausted from fighting everything. And sometimes I don't think I can take it anymore and I just need to cry. And so I'm saying that to him. I said, can you lean into those feelings? And so it's not going to surprise you. So he's lying there and he's leaning into them and tears are coming down the side of his face. And he's crying, but do you follow me? He's releasing it from inside him. And we did that. And then, then we came out of it. And I got to tell you, he was like 10 pounds lighter afterwards.
Not bad.
And the point is, people are listening saying, well, I can't do that. I think if you want to help people not just cope, but heal from their inside out, more of you who are listening and watching this can do it than you think you can. It's just what you're looking for. And so my whole commitment in the world was interesting. I just did an interview a couple hours ago, and the person said, and one of the questions was, and they were describing how they saw themselves and what was a single word that they related to. And they looked at me and they said, "What's your single word?" And I was embarrassed to sort of say it. And I said, "My single word is sadness. That when I look out at the world, I don't feel sad for myself. I just see all the hurt, the pain, and the fear, and the anger. And it just makes me really sad. And I feel I have to do something about it. And I've discovered just by letting people know that I'm hearing them, and my book, Just Listen, is about causing people to feel felt. That's what happened to Nancy. She felt. She felt less alone. And when she felt less alone, she started to cry with relief. And we could all do that.
Yeah, you're saying one of the most powerful phrases in our language, which is, I see you, I hear you. And isn't that really what we all want? I mean, it's interesting to me that you're talking about really looking in another person's eyes and seeing their soul and what it's telling you. And our entire world is masked right now. And the only way that we can communicate with each other is by looking into each other's eyes. What a beautiful time to practice this.
In fact, there's something I want to push out because I write extensively. And like many people, I'm affected by all the Black Lives Matter, the racial inequalities, just inequalities with anyone. And there's an initiative that I'm pushing out if you happen to be white and if you're touched by all these racial inequalities. I'm asking people from the age of 10, that's how early, from the age of 10, if you're white and you have a black friend, I'm asking you to do the following. Go up to them and say, can I ask you a few questions given all the stuff that's going on in the world? And hopefully they'll say yes. And you look them in the eye and you say, have you ever felt racially discriminated against? Have you ever felt profiled? Have you ever felt that the world was stacked against you? What your black friends, especially the black males, are going to say, that's all I've felt. Second question you ask them is, at its absolute worst, how awful has that felt? And I've been doing this, and they'll look at me, and their eyes start to tear up because you're listening to them, and they'll say, really awful. And then then say, take me to an incident. Take me to an incident that you had to live through where you felt that. And something special happens when you do that. When someone can tell you about an incident that you as the listener can see with your eyes, they re-feel their feelings with you. And when they re-feel those feelings with you and you feel them, they feel less alone. And then the last question, if you care about this friend, as I've done, I've said to some of my friends, why didn't you tell me it was so awful? Because I never knew it.
What responses have you had to that?
Well, I got to tell you a side story, which makes this more dramatic. I worked on the O.J. Simpson trial with the prosecution. I was an advisor of the prosecution, and when the not guilty verdict came out, whites thought it was a terrible injustice and blacks rejoiced. And I went to my black friends as opposed to the white people I knew in the prosecution. I went to my black friends and I said, this feels awful. This feels so unjust. This feels like you can't get a fair trial. And I said to my black friends, especially my black male friends, this feels awful. And I've only felt it for 2 days. Have you ever felt it? And they said, that's all I felt. And I looked at them and I said, why didn't you tell me it was so bad? And every one of them looked at me and they said, because you didn't want to know.
Yeah.
And they were right. And that's when I realized I had an inner racist, and I became a white co-host on an urban black radio show for 3 years, which is still running. And I think I have to go back there and visit. It's just that it's too much traffic. But that's what they'll say. If you reach out to your black friends and you look in their eyes, some of them might say you didn't want to know.
Yeah.
And if you keep looking them in the eye, and if you can say, as I did, you're probably right, but I know now.
Right.
And I'm sorry. And together we're going to make this world better. But
Wow.
then you have to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Then you've got to follow through, right?
So clearly, you feel like our stories matter, right? I mean, do you feel like right now in what we're in, our stories matter right now?
Stories matter more now than ever before. And I'll tell you why. When you're sharing a story with another person that you are emotionally connected to, you can't share a story that you're connected to and try to sell, convince, or manipulate the other person at the same time, because you're too busy being connected to the story. And when you can share a story where you're not trying to manipulate them, they lower their guard because they feel, oh, she's not selling us anything. And then if you show the vulnerability, people lean into that because nobody is vulnerable. Everybody's vulnerable inside, but we show this, no, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Right.
And so I think stories have the power to cause both parties to lower their guard. But something that I coach people on who use storytelling to sell stuff is don't do what we call a bait and switch. If your intention when you're sharing the story is to maneuver people into buying from you, you can do that. You're no worse than anyone else. But if you're sharing the story to invite the other person to join into a relationship with you that happens too rarely, do that and keep each other company. That's what I did with Nancy, wasn't it? I said, I'm going to keep you company. I'm not going to sell you on a treatment. I'm going to keep you company there. And I am telling you, the world is starved to be kept company with.
Yeah, I so agree with that. Wow.
Do you call yourself an empath where you can feel another person's emotions, especially as they're telling you their story? Because I think this is a hard time to be an empath in the world because there's so much.
Well, it's interesting. I am an empath, I guess. People would say that about me. They say you hear people from their inside out. And people would say, geez, you dealt with depressed and suicidal people for decades. Didn't it depress you? And as I said, it saddened me.
Yeah.
But when I could sense that people felt relief, I felt really fulfilled. I'm helping people feel relief who feel no relief. When I would see that I wasn't making them cry, I was letting them cry, and then I could see the smile on their face. I'd feel sad, but I realized how much of a gift that was giving them. Do we have time? Can I share an anecdote that I think you'll find interesting?
Absolutely.
Uh, yeah, I think you might like this one. So I was seeing this hard driving, successful woman, take no prisoners, but a great woman, really dynamic. Motivational speaker, yada, 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 all this energy. And so she comes in, and again, I'm a little bit of this empath. And so I get this feeling, and I looked at her, and I said, I need to stop you because I just figured out what you're most afraid of. She looked at me, huh? I said, yeah, and it's not being criticized, controlled, or belittled. You don't like any of those things. They make you a little bit uptight, but you have defenses against all of them because that's what you have all the time going on. But that's not what you're really afraid of. And she's looking at me like, what? And then I looked at her as I'm looking into your eyes, and I said, this is what you're really afraid of. And she's looking at me like, you better get it right. I said, what you're really afraid of is feeling unconditionally safe and unconditionally loved. And there's nothing you can do to earn it. And there's nothing you can do to lose it. And she went, and then her eyes just started to tear up. And then she collapsed to the side on the couch. And she just started sobbing. And because I understand this thing, I let her sob for 5 minutes. She picks herself up. She's going to have to redo her makeup. And bloodshot eyes, makeup, huge smile, 5 pounds lighter. She said, I've been looking for that all my life. And you're right. Since it was never there, I coped. I just never healed. And then I said, well, looks like we have our work cut out for us. So can you track with any of that?
I sure can. Big time.
Well,
Yes.
Say what landed for you when I said that.
Me?
Go ahead. You go, Mom.
I have lived my life dancing to whatever song was being played at the time. And not because it was my dance, but it was the dance I thought you wanted. And so I denied myself and denied myself. I just coped. And that coping was globbed on top of my pain, you know, and it needed to be free. Like you said earlier, I was screaming. I was screaming to let my pain out, to be heard, to know that I existed. I spent, I'm 100 years old, so I've spent most of my life not knowing I really exist.
Yeah.
Sherry?
Sherry, did that land for you at all? Or what are you hearing as your mom speaks right now?
Oh, I watched her do the dance that was expected of her. And I think that what you just said is key for her, is key for all of us, especially right now, to be able to kind of peel back all the layers and the guardedness and get to, drill down and get to what's really going on for people. Isn't that the way that this world is going to change, and how we will feel connected to one another as humans? And it's very simple. the way that you're speaking about it. I mean, you don't need years of training to do this. This is
Yeah.
a simple, empathetic look into somebody's eyes and see them and ask questions that they have probably never been asked before.
Hmm. I have a mentor. All my mentors have passed away, his name was Warren Bennis. And anybody who knows anything about leadership knows that name. And he gave me this quote that he learned from a playwright named Saul Bellow. And the quote was, "Be a first-class noticer." Because when you notice, it's different than looking, watching, and seeing. When you look and watch and see, you're an observer, you're passive. But when you're a first-class noticer, you just connect with whatever you're noticing.
Yeah.
And if what you're noticing is the pain of someone else, and they see that you're there just noticing it, not judging it, not trying to maneuver it, the pain from it never being noticed suddenly will grab at the opportunity, and it will grab onto you from deep inside like you're throwing them a life raft, and they're going
I
to grab
agree.
onto it.
Yeah.
And all it takes is being a first-class noticer. But to do that, you have to let go of any agenda, anything you're trying to sell people on. And you need to notice with a beginner's mind, which is what my 16-month-old grandson does. That's why I am blessed to be able to see him most days. And I just watch the way he notices the world.
Yeah, he does it. Babies do it with all of their being. They look at something with all of their being, don't they?
Yeah, and there's a saying, I coach a lot of leaders and managers, and what he does is he has so far basic trust. There was a fellow named Eric Erickson who wrote about the psychosocial levels of our development, and at the very core is we can either have basic trust or basic mistrust. If we were abused, abandoned, or treated poorly as a young age, we have basic mistrust. And I am bathing my grandson in basic trust every time I'm with him. I don't have a thing on my mind other than amazement at him. And when you have basic trust in the world, you go where you're looking. When you have basic distrust, you look where you're going.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And he goes where he's looking. And I just watch it. And when he sees something that he's noticing, he looks up at Grandpa, and I smile and I say, yeah. And when he stumbles and he hurts himself, he looks at Grandpa with a look that says, is this going to kill me? He's not saying that. I say, it'll be okay. And I am marinating him in basic trust, because I don't think I did that with my own children, because I was too busy earning a living. I was too busy. I think I was a decent dad, but I had to go off and then go earn a living. And but I'm going to do it right with my grandson, and my granddaughter's going to be coming out in a couple months. And there's a saying. I don't know if you might get a check out of this. God gives grandparents grandchildren so they can be glad they didn't kill their kids when they were teenagers.
Love it.
That would be true. Oh, that's great.
What do you say to the person that is listening to this and says, I don't have anybody in my life to ask me those questions or to really see me for who I am?
It's interesting because there's something that I've been doing trainings with high schoolers about stress, and we've come up with a tool which we could probably turn into a mobile app, but I'm kind of technologically challenged. And what it is you get yourself a little notebook. I have one somewhere around here, and you have a picture of a parent, a mentor, a hero. In the one I showed them, I put in a picture of LeBron James. So a hero. You don't have a relationship with him. And so there's a picture of LeBron James inside the cover. And on the other side, it says, "You can do this." So imagine that mentor, parent, living, dead, the hero. And then, and what you write down is you put down the date and time when something upsetting happens. And so you imagine they're walking you through the following steps. So imagine LeBron James saying this to you, or your mom, or your dad. And so you put down the time and date, and it's a stress relief tool. And the first question is, what just happened? And you write down, you don't do a whole essay, you write down a little bit. Second question is, what did you think and feel when it happened? You write a little bit of that down. The third question is, what does it make you want to do right now? And you can write down some impulse. That's the most important thing. Well, I feel like going out and having a drink, or a six-pack, or binging, or throwing something at the wall. Fourth step is, what'll happen if you do that? It'll feel great, and then I'll have to clean up the mess. Fifth step, take a deep breath. Sixth step, what would be a better thing to do? And then finally, the seventh step, why that? So do you see what you're doing is you're walking people through an upset, through the destructive impulse. You're giving them insight, and it's built on this relationship you have with this person that you don't even know.
I like it.
And you see how that can, and see, I have something I call the Dead Mentors Society. 7 mentors, they've all died. And I'm fairly spontaneous. I'm really grateful that you're letting me go on, and and we abandoned your formulaic questions months ago here. and I think it's going okay. You're not giving me like this yet. But in the past, I would have beaten up on myself. I would call in one of my dead mentors, and I'd say, I did it again. And one of my dead mentors would say, "You woke me for this?" I'd say, yeah, I did it again. "What'd you do, Mark?" "I started these stories. I didn't know the point of half of them. I was amazed that I even got back to them. Boy, I just think in tangents. When am I gonna go rat, 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 rat?" And my dead mentor would say, "So what'd you feel and think?" I feel like, God, I'm never going to learn how to do it right. And then, so what's your impulse? Well, my impulse is, I don't think I'm fit company to be a guest on any of these podcasts. And then what my dead mentor would say is, well, what'd the hosts think? I think they liked me a lot.
Very true.
And then finally, I'm varying from the 7 steps, because I have this affectionate relationship with my dead mentors. And so they say, Mark, what I'm going to tell you right now, because you keep waking me from the dead. And I say, I know. Put a sock in it, Mark. Okay. And then I miss my dead mentor. And I think, wow, was I lucky to have that mentor in my life? Ooh. And I'll tell you, you can't feel grateful and miss someone and feel blessed that they were in your life and even know what the heck you did wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm good to go.
Well, no, I think that's a good strategy because, you know, if we don't have people in our lives right now that can give us what we're looking for, we can give us what we're looking for. And sometimes that comes in the form of a visualization or a picture of a hero or a parent who's passed or whatever. Um,
See, and I'll tell you something I've always felt. Okay, I'm not going to beat myself up anymore, but I used to feel less than all the people who could use positive affirmations.
yeah.
I've never been able to use positive affirmations. I wish they worked, but I think down deep I am lonesome for that connection between that me and that caring other who was never there.
Right.
So when I visualize that person talking with me, that seems to work. But again, I may be peculiar, you know, and I'm envious of the people who are able to have these affirmations and post-it notes. You know, you are a wonderful human being, Mark. You are a good podcast guest. That would never work.
I think this is exactly what our listeners needed to hear right now.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
healing will come whether it's individually, in family systems, in communities, globally, when we connect, when we truly connect to one another. This was exactly what we were looking for. Thank you. Mom, it looks
You answered our questions, whether you realized it or not. Yeah,
I,
and it was organic, which is really good, you know.
so I got to call one of my dead mentors, Warren Bennis. Warren, I dodged another bullet.
There you go. Oh, it was great.
Well,
thank you for
thank
being on this show. You nailed it. We need to feel seen and heard
and
in our
felt
lives,
and
all of
felt.
us.
Yeah,
And say it again.
We need to feel seen, heard, and felt.
And felt, all three of them.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for giving me a long enough leash and trusting me with it.
It was great.
How do people find you if they want to hear more about your meanderings?
Well, if you go to markgoulston.com, markgoulston.com, you can also find me on Instagram. And I have a podcast that the two of you graced me with called My Wake Up Call, where I talk to amazing people like the two of you about what matters most to you and your wake up calls to getting there. And I would tell people, please check out the episode I did with Sherry and Jan.
Oh,
It,
that's awesome.
it's a keeper. It's a keeper. So
Uh,
you can check those out.
Listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. Mark, thank you for honoring us. Sherry and I can be located on the traumaspeakers.com, and there you can find our book, and you can see where you can see our coaching packages and our speaking packages, and we were glad to be on today.
Everyone, stay well, stay connected to yourself and connected to the people in your world. Thank you again, Mark.
Thank you.